All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay Banach, and I'm the Director of Arts and Cultural Services for the City of Wichita. Today is an informational panel or a session around the operating grants with the Cultural Funding Program with the City of Wichita. With that, we'll do a couple introductions. We have a couple of the committee members for the Cultural Funding Committee on today's session, as well as Jesse Koza, our Cultural Arts Administrator, who's going to walk us through the information related to this year's grant. So Beth, if I could put you on the spot to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Beth Oakes. I'm the chair of the Cultural Funding Committee.
And Cynthia.
I am Cynthia Berner. I am retired from the Wichita Public Library, and I've been on the committee for 3 years now as a member.
Wonderful, thank you. There may be an opportunity at the end of today's session for you to ask committee members directly questions, or you can always ask staff questions in today's call or throughout the grant cycle. With that, I'll pass it over to Jesse. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Jesse Koza, the Cultural Arts Administrator for the City of Wichita. And Lindsay, if you could enable screen sharing for me, that would be great. And then I will share my screen. Gonna go through some slides for you all. So today we're talking about our largest pool of grant funding, the operational grant. If at any point you want to look over this information that I've covered, the majority of it can be found at our website, which is listed right there, wichita.gov/art. My email is all over that website. I'll also give it to you here at the end of this presentation. So if you have questions or you just don't feel like looking up the information, you're always welcome to reach out to me to ask any question you might have. So the Division of Arts and Culture, known as a local arts agency, we're one of 4,500 across the country. And we work to sustain the health and vitality of the arts and artists locally, while also striving to make the arts accessible to all members of a community. National Endowment for the Arts, Mid-America Arts Alliance, Arts Council locally, these are all other examples of your local arts agencies. The Cultural Funding Program has a mission to encourage and provide financial support to the arts and cultural organizations that demonstrate and document excellence in quality artistic and cultural programs, professional artistic and administrative staffing, financial stability, and their contribution to the community at large. We are trying to support exemplary organizations that contribute to the quality of life and add to the economic growth and vitality of our community. The Cultural Funding Committee is a subcommittee of the Arts Council. There are 11 members on the council. 7 are appointed by the City Council and 4 are appointed by the Arts Council. And the chair of the Cultural Funding Committee is selected by the Arts Council. The Arts Council themselves have a mission to advance and promote arts and culture in the Wichita community through advocacy, education, and outreach. You can see some of their major projects at the bottom there, including their own grant program. So while the city funds operations, the Arts Council generally funds programmatic grants. They also, like we said, help run the Cultural Funding Committee, and they also host an annual art award, along with just in general doing advocacy for the city. This current year, fiscal year 2023 for the city gave out $432,000 in its competitive grants. And that covered basically 23 total organizations and individual artists. You can see there we gave out 3 artist access grants and 1 developing arts grant. We talked about the developing arts grant yesterday. So you can find that video on YouTube here in the next couple of days if you'd like more information. And then basically a number of other local arts organizations received operational funding through the Cultural Arts Funding Program for this current fiscal year. Our current grant cycle opened on March 6th, but it doesn't close until June 2nd, so there's plenty of time to get those applications in. One thing that our cultural plan identifies are institutions that can't apply for cultural funding. So these are those institutions. The 3 on the left that are sort of in that lighter seafoam green color, City Arts, the Indian Museum, and Cowtown are all city staffed as well as city owned buildings. On the right, those blue items, they run out of city owned buildings and receive direct funding from the city. All in all, this year the city gave out about $3 million in cultural funding, with some of it going to these cultural institutions as well. If you want to find this information later on wichita.gov/arts, this is just a quick moment to show you where you can find that. As you scroll down the page, you'll see cultural arts funding up here in the bottom middle of your page. You can click that blue learn more about funding opportunities to see all of our cultural funding information on our page. You might notice it could be small on your screen, but right in the top middle, it also says cultural arts funding on our blue bar. So the timeline for this grant program. As I said, the applications opened on March 6th. So they've been out there for a little over 2 weeks now. From March 6th through June 2nd, Lindsay and I are available to answer questions and help make sure that your application is in compliance. We're not necessarily here to make sure that your answers are what the committee's looking for. One, because we don't entirely know what the committee's looking for, and two, because that's just not what we are supposed to be doing. On June 2nd, that is the submission deadline for the application. That should say FY 2024, I apologize. And then on July 20th, we have our Q&A session. If you've not done one of our Q&A sessions in the past, that is basically an opportunity for the organizations to come in and answer any questions that might have come up while the committee was reading the application. So it's not a moment for you to be grilled by the committee. It's really just about making sure that the committee fully understands everything that you've written. If there's a gray area in your application, or if there's something they'd like you to expand upon, they will ask you about that in the Q&A session. It also just helps the committee get to know you and your organization a little bit better. A week after those Q&A sessions, the committee gathers to deliberate funding recommendations. And then the week after that, they finalize their recommendations for the city council. These are just recommendations though. So in August or September of this year, Lindsay will take those recommendations to city council in a city council meeting, and hopefully they will approve them. We typically expect approval. And so once those are approved, we can then report to our applicants whether they received funding and how much funding they've received. Unfortunately, we're unable to give you that information before city council approves the grant. So it can feel like a very long time to wait for that information. As you can see there, the last time you're really involved in the process is July 20th, and it may not be until September that we have them approved. But once we have them approved, we will notify you, and we will draft contracts and get those signed and ready to go for calendar year 2024. If you're a new grant recipient, you can start invoicing the city on January 1st, 2024. If you are an existing recipient, we just need to make sure that your 2023 annual report is in before we can start invoicing for the 2024 funds. Now, with our move, which I'll talk about here in a little bit, to Submittable, our new online grant program, hopefully annual report submissions will be easier, faster, quicker to you. So we can get that invoice date closer to January 1 for the existing organization. One additional note, something that started this year with the 2023 funding, organizations are able to request their funding in a lump sum, in 2 invoices, or in 4 invoices. So typically in the past, it was once every quarter. Now we're making it so you can do it all at once if you want. So there's 1, 2, or 4. You sort of have a few options for how you want to receive your funding. So eligibility, a nice big wall of text for you, but it's pretty simple when you start getting into it. Is your organization eligible? Well, it needs to be a 501c3 nonprofit. Your primary purpose is to produce or present arts or cultural programs. You need to serve the citizens of the city of Wichita. So if you are outside the city limits, you need to have a good argument for why your programs serve the residents of the city of Wichita. You're not a cultural institution. That's that page we looked at a few slides ago. You have at least 5 years of operational history serving the citizens of Wichita. So if you have less than 5 years, you may qualify for a developing arts grant. And so if you want to know more about that, you can either ask me, or you can check the website, or you can, in a few days, like I said, look at YouTube for that video. To qualify, you need to have a full-time professional management and or cultural artistic staff. And you need to present a full season of exhibitions or performances. So this isn't just for like your group's whole existence is to present an annual festival. That's not necessarily what these grants are about. You need to be ADA compliant, and you need to be an equal opportunity employer. If you're worried about that, I can provide you with the documentation just to make sure that you line up with all of it, but I have a fairly good suspicion that all of our organizations will. So the review process, this is that March 6th through June 2nd process. Like I said, we will review every application that comes in to make sure that it is in compliance with the eligibility requirements. We don't want you to be rejected for funding because you forgot one page of your financial information. We will absolutely make sure that you check every box before it goes to the committee. But like I said, it's not an evaluation of the content or quality of the application. We are just here to make sure it's right, and then we pass it along for the Cultural Funding Committee for them to weigh in on whether or not they think you qualify for funding. If the recommendation for funding is approved, like I said, we will then draft contracts and get those to you in time for the city's fiscal year 2024. You will be required to submit an annual report, or you might know it as a final year-end report for the funding year. Again, that will likely be through Submittable. Anytime you receive city funding, you could be audited. I don't know that that happened recently, but it's always a possibility. So just please be sure to be responsible with the funds that you receive. And you could be asked at any time to provide additional financial information related to the city funding you receive. That's just oversight to make sure you are being good stewards of the city's money. So the application itself has actually not changed from last year into this year. It might look different because it's entirely online now through Submittable, but it starts with organization info, which includes the size of your organization, and we'll get into that in a moment, the amount requested, your address, and so on. Your current staff list, that's a fillable section. Your current board of trustees or directors list, again, that's a fillable section. Now, we do have slots for you to upload that information if you would prefer, or if I didn't provide you with enough lines. If we ask that you include a copy of the organization's mission statement. So that's just hopefully a copy and paste for you, and a single paragraph of your operations or what you do as an organization. There are several narrative questions, and then we ask for some attendance and fundraising data and a few other additional pieces of financial information, and those are uploads. So that required financial information, a current IRS Form 990, basically as you submitted it to the IRS. The past 3 fiscal years of profit and loss statements, those are also known as statements of activity. The past 3 years of balance sheets or statements of financial position. Your current fiscal year operational budget that's been approved by your board. And an itemized list of in-kind services with dollar amounts included for each of the past 3 years. That is important because our grant program is divided into sizes based on your actual expenses. And we don't include in-kind services in your actual expenses. So we need to make sure that you are doing that as well, that these have been separated and they're on a page and we can see what you received in kind, and that it's not affecting what you claim your budget is. For organizations with an annual operating budget of $500,000 or more, we do ask for a fiscal year audit no older than 2021 performed by an outside accounting firm. $500,000 or more, that is our largest organization. That, I think for most organizations of that size, you're probably doing that anyway. The narrative questions, I'm not going to list every single question that they ask, but these are the general areas that they hit. In the past, you were asked to answer all of these questions within 4 pages. Now they are individual boxes, and we have imposed a character limit on those boxes, sort of in the spirit of that 4-page limit. But basically, quality of organization, financial sustainability, and community impact are the 3 areas that this grant program really looks at. So under quality of organization, how innovative have you been? What's your community engagement like? If you steward a collection, what's that been like? And then the attendance report sort of comes a little later. Financial sustainability, we're asking how will the city funds be used? We want to see that you have different forms of financial support. Community impact, what is your target audience? What is your marketing plan? Do you do youth programming? What's your economic impact? Obviously, some of you may know we're currently studying the economic impact for the city. So those numbers may not be as specific this year as they will be next year when you have that data from us, but we still want to know what your data is on the economic impact. One thing that we really want to stress is that these grant funds are for operation. We don't fund programmatic, we don't fund projects. So we want to make sure that your organization has the money it needs to keep the lights on, to pay for that marketing plan, to hire somebody to help you with youth programming, not necessarily to just put on a gallery show. So these are our organization sizes, and this might be a little confusing, but I'm more than happy to work with you on it to make sure that you get the number that is right for you. So large organizations, like I said, $500,000 plus, can request 8% of their annual expenditure, or a maximum of $75,000. So whichever one of those, I suppose, is lower, they can request. Medium organizations, so $250,000 up to $500,000, can request 10% of their annual expenses. And then small organizations are those below $250,000, and they can request 15%. And like I said a little bit earlier, if you are sort of a younger organization, or you still are developing in some way, and you have an annual operating budget of $50,000 or less, you may be eligible for additional funding through the Developing Arts Program. It is okay to apply for both of those if you fit the criteria. The submission process. So this used to be much more complicated. Now you will just go to wichita.submittable.com. There's a lot of text just to make sure you understand what we're looking for each grant type. But at the bottom of the column there at wichita.submittable.com, you will see our operational grants link, and you just click there and you will start your application. Very simple. It comes directly to me when you're done, and I will confirm for you that it was received and that everything was, that we have everything that we need. We have a couple other additional grants, like I've mentioned, the Developing Arts Grant, operational assistance for organizations with at least 2 years of operations and operating budgets under $50,000. We also have individual artist access grants. That's for professional development for individual artists. There's been a slight change to the timeline for those in an effort to get the money for artist access closer to when artists typically need to use it. The application date for those will be in a few months from now, and they will start review in Q4 of this year. And then the Arts Council that we talked about several slides ago, they have their own categories of grants, individual artist grants, and then sponsorships for events and the like. That is more programmatic funding. So if you're looking for a sponsor for an event or for you as an artist that isn't professional development related, I would check out wichitaarts.com and see how they can help you. Like I said, I'm Jesse, and that's my email there on the screen, jkoza@wichita.gov. You can always give me a call. My number is 316-350-3241. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have and help you determine your eligibility for these grants. Or, just if you have a specific question about how to get one of your financial documents, or if this is the correct financial document, I'll always look at it and help you figure that out. And again, if you want more information, or if you want to read this information on your own time, wichita.gov/arts. Thank you all very much. Lindsay.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesse. And for those of you that came on mid-presentation, this meeting is being recorded and it's going to be posted to the city's YouTube channel. We have a cultural funding committee sub-channel on the City of Wichita's page. And then I'll also be posted on wichita.gov/arts, so you can refer to it throughout the grant cycle. With that, I saw that we had at least one more committee member hop on, Anthony Joyner. And I think we lost one of our committee members, but Beth and Anthony, to put you on the spot a little bit, any hot tips from the committee's perspective on what makes a successful application for this grant opportunity?
Well, thanks, Lindsay. It's great to see you all here this morning. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come on and learn more about the applications. So as you look at the applications, excuse me, I would just recommend that you make sure that you have thoroughly and accurately completed the questions. Sometimes I know myself, when I'm writing a grant, I tend to get off course a little bit and go down a rabbit hole. So make sure that you're addressing the questions and be succinct in that, because you are limited in the space that you're provided. If you have questions about the general process or have any questions about clarification on the questions, please reach out to staff. They're very helpful and they are there for you. We want you to have the best application possible, so that we can give the maximum amount of funds available.
Thank you, Beth. Anthony, would you like to chime in at all?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo some of what Beth just said in regards to making sure to answer the question that is being provided. I know a lot of times you're going to look at those questions and you're going to say, oh, I said this, but I feel like this needs to be explained a little bit more, or I answered these questions, but I don't feel like I was able to tell them everything about my organization. You'll have time for that when we do the Q&A. If we have additional questions that we think might help your application, we'll ask those questions during the Q&A. Don't use the space that you could be using for answering the direct questions that we're asking to try and explain everything about your organization or try to prove certain points. The other thing is that you need to make sure that you recognize that this is something to actually serve the community, and not, let's say, this is something that you're building just for yourself and your own personal growth. That's not necessarily what this is for. We're investing in the arts that actually help to build the community. So keep those things in mind. And again, don't be afraid to ask a million questions. There are people here to answer questions. So ask a million questions if you need to, in order to make your application the best possible.
Thank you, Anthony. And Shannon, I apologize, I didn't see you hop on. Shannon Boone is also a committee member. Anything you'd like to add?
All good. Actually, I think Beth and Anthony pretty much hit everything I would have said, and I will just echo once more, ask questions. It's what we're here for.
Wonderful. Thank you to the committee and thank you to the applicants that are hopping on. If I could just offer a couple more hot tips from staff's perspective. Just a friendly reminder that this is not a needs-based grant. It's a fresh competitive grant each year. The committee members change year to year, though there is some crossover between previous years. So there are new committee members this year who've never looked at your application from past years. There's also no comparison to past year funding allocations. The committee does not look at what was awarded last year and make that into consideration for this year. It's a fresh pot of money each year with a fresh pool of applicants. So keep that in mind. Though it's likely that committee members are familiar with their organization. The committee members are all active members of the arts community. You might know some of them, and they might be involved with your organization to a certain level. With that in mind, we really discourage lobbying or communicating with committee members directly around the grant process. Please let staff run interference if you have questions, because we definitely don't want an appearance of conflict. With that in mind, committee members will recuse themselves if they have a professional relationship or in a decision-making capacity or in a financial benefiting capacity from an organization who is applying. They will recuse themselves from that specific application. Another thing to keep in mind is this is a very competitive application. Our grant pool in last fiscal year's applications, or for current fiscal year 2023, less than 50% of all eligible applicant funding was approved. So for the operational grants, you can tier it a little bit based on your budget size of what you're actually eligible to apply for. Of those eligibility, less than 50% of eligible budgets were actually approved. So this is a very competitive grant. And then just another reminder, or kind of just an FYI, that the committee understands that the last few years have been strange and weird and have impacted your organizations in very unique ways. And they're very understanding of that. The committee also went through the pandemic and recognizes that your budgets might be roller coasters over the last few years. And you have an opportunity in the narratives to reflect that, but just know that they're empathetic and compassionate about what the entire world went through over the last few years. And then don't wait to the last minute. We have a new program this year with Submittable. Do not wait to the last minute to submit your grant. Hopefully, Submittable makes everyone's lives incredibly easier in the grant process this year. But we really want to make sure that you put in your grant well in advance, and especially if you'd like staff to help review or ensure that you're at compliance, we really need them put in a few days in advance if we're going to be able to go through and give you the best feedback that we can. And then another FYI, not necessarily related to this year's funding cycle, but something that's happening within the Division of Arts and Culture. Our Cultural Arts Strategic Plan is under review. That plan really tells us how to distribute funds and really guides the funding program. Because it's under review, this program could look very different next year. It's way too early in the process to determine what that's going to look like, but it's likely it will change. This funding program has been pretty static for a couple decades. And while it does a great job of distributing funds to the community, it's also been very limiting to some organizations. So we are going to be looking at changing up the overall funding program between all three grants. And it could look very different next year. It might not look different. We don't really know. What we have heard loud and clear from current recipients, from the committee, from city council, from community, is that we do want to protect operational grants. We recognize that operational support is really coveted funding. So we hope and we plan to still offer some sort of operational support in the future. And then the other part of it that's been heard loud and clear is serving underserved or historically marginalized communities in some capacity. So although we don't know what the funding program is going to look like, those two items will definitely be addressed in the future of the program. With that, that is my end of my spiel. And I'd like to open it up to the group if there's any questions from those on today's call.
If I could say one more thing before we do that, you just reminded me of something. There are a lot of organizations that I know that have been on the fence about applying for cultural funding. And maybe you've received cultural funding once before and then something happened to where you didn't receive cultural funding and then you just completely left the committee, left cultural funding alone, or several other things like that have stopped people from applying for cultural funding over the years. I would like to encourage anyone who is eligible for cultural funding, who meets the criteria, to go ahead and apply, because there are several organizations I know in the city right now that could use those funds, that are actually doing things to benefit the community, but they're not currently using those funds. They're not currently even applying for those funds. So please apply for them. And like Lindsay just said, we are listening to the issues that have been brought up in regards to cultural funding, and we're hoping to get some of those issues addressed. But the only way for us to do that is for us to get everybody to the table and actually voice what's going on. The last thing is that I know several times in the past, before we even go there, there's several times where things seemed like they were going to change and maybe they weren't. Trust that this time will be different, and just help us out in making this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And yeah, just to reiterate, let us know if something's working or not working. If you think you're eligible, please reach out and we'll help confirm that eligibility. And we really encourage any eligible applicant to apply. With that in mind, submittable is a new process for both you and for staff and for the committee this year. We think that we've troubleshot every single aspect of it, but there's likely an error in there or limitation in there that we haven't caught. So please reach out if something looks funky. Let us know. We're only a phone call or an email away. With that in mind, don't wait to the last minute to do that, because we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to address issues as they may arise.
A quick note, the submittable info session is tomorrow.
Yes, thank
10
you.
and 2.
Any questions from prospective applicants? All right, I don't see any questions in the chat and no one chiming in. With that, just a reminder that this is being recorded and we'll be posting it to the city's YouTube channel and to the city's website hopefully by the end of the week. Be sure to join us tomorrow if you're available for the submittable info session, specifically on how to use submittable and apply through that new platform. But on behalf of the city of Wichita, thank you for all that you're doing for the community. Regardless of this application pool, we really appreciate and see the important work that's being done in the arts and cultural sector across the community. So thank you for all you do. And hopefully we can find a way to support your organization.
I apologize. I do have a question.
Sure, go for it.
Sorry. Yes. So I'm actually using my wife's Zoom account. She is a music instructor in Wichita, and I'm wondering about the process of becoming a 501c nonprofit. Is that something that is something that would be worth pursuing? Is it the only way to get cultural grants funding, is to be a 501c? I noticed that that there were some operating grants that that require you to be 501c, but then there are also, I think you mentioned, Jesse, that there was individual artist grants as well.
Yeah, so great question. There are two grant opportunities that do require the 501c3, the Developing Arts Grant and the Operational Grant that we talked about today. There is an Artist Access Grant that the city provides, which goes to individual artists, and that's not a requirement of that grant. The Arts Council also has opportunities as well, which do not require 501c3 status for small project assistance for or sponsorship for projects. So those do not necessarily require a 501c3. The Arts Council also provides fiscal agency, depending on what you're looking to do, that the Arts Council could serve as a 501c3 for a prospective applicant to various opportunities that exist locally, regionally, nationally. But for the Developing Arts Grant and the operational grants, you do have to be a 501c3 to apply for those funding.
Okay. And so those are both, those require 501c3. So then also, let me just give you some, like an example. If I were to, like, if somebody were to want to teach a workshop or something, like a class that was like that was serving the community, that was a single event that took, you know, a couple of weeks or something. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. I'm asking a question. Hold on. So, would that be something that could be applied for through the? It sounds like the Arts Council grants might fill that kind of a.
Based on that
niche.
information, a one-time program that would be publicly accessible, that would likely
Okay.
fit one of the Arts Council's funding opportunities. Unfortunately, I don't believe it would fit any of the City of Wichita's funding opportunities, as we fund year-round operations or organizations that have year-round programs. So we don't do one-offs like festivals or parades
Right.
through this program. However, we
Right.
do professional development for individual artists. So that doesn't necessarily include educational opportunities, but it could depending on the circumstance. So as you look through the grant applications, feel free to reach out to us directly about specific instances or questions. Justin and myself also serve as administrative support for the Arts Council's grants. So we can also guide you through the cities and the Arts Council's opportunities.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you again. Again, we really appreciate the important work that all of you are doing in the community, and to the committee members, thank you for the abundance of paperwork that you're about to embark on this grant season. A lot of labor of love and appreciation for arts and culture happens throughout this cycle. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.